Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Justin Nealand, and today we're going to be talking about fat phobia. Many of my clients come to me and say, okay, I've learned that I have this fat phobia inside me, that I have a bias against fat people and towards thin people, that I associate really positive stuff with thin people and I associate really negative stuff with fat people. I want to stop. How do I stop being fat phobic? This is a huge question, obviously, but what I tell them is that it is exactly the same as you would in any other social justice framework, because this is a social justice issue. You do the dismantling and re-education and re-exposure and self-inquiry and everything that you would do to dismantle any other bias towards a group of people. So lately, it has been a lot more popular for people to do anti-racism work. And that basically is the dismantling of your internal biases that you did not invent, that were handed to you because you grew up in a culture that had a bunch of racist stuff happening, a bunch of racist stuff taught to you. So you ended up with racist biases that you now have to acknowledge and go in and dismantle. And that requires, a lot of times, it requires a completely different education. You have to go educate yourself, get education from people of color, change the sources of information, um, change who you're exposed to, acknowledging your privilege. The whole thing is about dismantling what you find inside yourself, which means the first step is you just say, oh my gosh, I have some racist biases. Okay, what do I do with this next? And then you do the work to dismantle. It is exactly the same with fatness. So I believe that homophobia is a really, really good um, sort of analogous situation for us to look at with this, because 30 years ago, gay people were so prejudiced against, they were so marginalized and discriminated against, that it really seemed completely impossible that there would be something in our culture that we have today, like just sort of gay marriage. Gay is great, pro queer. People are challenging gender roles left and right, gender identity. The whole Zoomer generation is kind of like, that seems dumb. Let's just do it differently. So it has moved incredibly fast over the 30 years, from like, we literally won't give you a job, to be whatever you want, we're celebrating it, for the most part, in mainstream culture. So that, how did that happen? If we look at that, that gives us the information we need about the anti-fat bias and how to overcome it, how to overcome fat phobia. How did those people, whoever was around 30 years ago, how did they overcome homophobia? Because they were born and grew up in a culture in which a bunch of homophobic stuff was happening. They learned a bunch of homophobic biases. They learned a disgust reaction, which is where I think it's a really interesting analogy. People learned to see two men together and feel disgust. They learned to see two women together and feel disgust. And now, very few people would say that that's true. Because now it's like, yeah, it's awesome. Love is love. Like, cool. Sometimes it's kind of like, damn, that's super hot. But it's no longer discussed. How did we go from everyone feeling disgust about this to almost nobody feeling disgust about it? It is very similar with fatness. There was a belief and a bias that it was inherently disgusting, that it was inherently bad, that it was inherently broken and immoral. And now we're just like, oh, we were wrong about that. How did that happen? So the relearning of how you hold a group of people like this, it is very, very possible. So if you're sitting here being like, oh my God, I'm so fat phobic, it's so deep in me, I really believe fat people are worse and thin people are better. Oh my God, how do I stop? Like, have faith, take a breath. It can happen. We can do it. We can do it in the mainstream and we can do it inside of ourselves. It just takes time. And it takes unlearning everything you learned. Like those people had to unlearn what they learned about queerness and gayness. They had to unlearn that. They had to unpack it inside themselves. They had to expose themselves to different people, different representations of different kinds of people in relationships. And with time, they got to a point where they're like, huh, yeah, I don't remember why I thought it was gross. And also, you should totally be able to get married. So we can make a huge shift around these things. The same is true with fatness. We have learned that fatness is disgusting. We have learned to have a disgust reaction to that because we believe it is immoral. We believe it is a sign of weak character, or a lack of integrity and discipline and hard work and intelligence and all the things. That is the bias. That is literally, like, that's fat phobia. Just like that bias was homophobia. So we learned all those things, means we can unlearn them. But you have to commit yourself to the value of unlearning them, which is essentially committing yourself to your progressive values. committing yourself to moving your mind and your heart out of the biases that you learned, which are oppressive and harmful and wrong, and changing them with time, with practice, with courage, with humility, with self-inquiry, with re-education, with all of the tools that you can imagine. You are going to relearn until you get to a point where that no longer seems true and you can't really remember. This is where I feel sometimes I'm like, I don't exactly remember why I felt that way, but I do remember feeling that way. I remember looking around and thinking like, oh, that person should lose weight. Okay, no, I had that thought. I just don't remember why, and I can't it just feels super disconnected to me now. It's been a long time that I've been doing this work. Granted, it does take time, but you can get there. You can get there, and then you go, like, that fat person is so hot. Like you can really rewire this stuff. It is absolutely not as objectively, a part of who we are as people as we think. Just like so many people 30 years ago were like, you're not going to change my mind. Being gay is bad and gross and wrong, and that's just the way it is. So I use this analogy because I think it's really helpful to give you a paradigm for what this work looks like. It is not going to necessarily tell you what to do like tomorrow, but it is going to give you a sense of what we're doing, both collectively as a culture and you as a person, each of us as people. The work is to change what we learned by really bravely naming what's in there in the first place, where we learned it, who it harms, where we stand in terms of acknowledging privilege, learning about the experiences of people who don't have that privilege, moving through this re-education process and who you're exposed to, and hopefully soon we'll have better representation in the world of people who are just like fat without that being the reason they're on TV, or fat without that being the joke, or whatever it is, so that we can start to shift our biases out of this garbage that we have right now about fatness, because it's wrong. And if you want to know how to get out of it, just think about how everybody got out of the other one and how everybody will be getting out of racism. That all you do is commit yourself to your progressive values and do the work internally to dismantle what you learned and move towards something that's a lot more true, which is, that's not a big deal, right? That's how we feel about gay people. That should be how we feel about fat people. Like, whatever. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Great. And that is where we're going. So that's my answer for how to actually do it and what it looks like. And also kind of to the question of like, is it possible? Because I get that all the time. People say, I just don't think it's possible. Promise you it's possible. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and hit like and get the alert for when I make new videos. I will be putting up more videos more often, and I am glad to have you here for them. And that's it. Thank you for watching.